Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm going to take a look at what I felt were the most important changes with the Phoenix update. Even though we only got 3 uniforms and 1 T3 for Hyperion, there were a lot of quality of life changes and, believe it or not, content that came with this update. So I know some people were expecting things for the Eternals, like more characters and awakenings, but I'm pretty sure that's coming with the mid-month update, since that's going to be the bigger update, since they are including the epic quest in that, or so they teased. I know a lot of people are wondering if Wolverine's newest uniform actually makes him good, so worthy of building up or even getting the uniform, and if Captain America's uniform, his 11th uniform, is actually good and worth getting as well. And that's obviously what I'm going to be showing in this testing for this video, as well as Hyperion's upgrades or rework. There's a lot to cover, so I'm just going to get right into it because I don't want this video to be too long for a highlight video. Right off the bat here, you can see the uniform options for the newest uniforms. For the most part, they're okay, but there are a bunch of premium uniforms in there, like Iceman and Sentinel, the Nimrod uniform, as well as Lim Snow, and some big character or costly uniform upgrades like the ones for Jean and Black Dwarf and Proxima. Also, it's kind of painful that they included the Captain America previous uniform for Hyperion, since most people want to get the newest uniform, so that kind of hurts. Anyways, one of the first things I'm going to take a look at is the most notable changes from the old uniforms to the newest uniforms. For Captain America's new uniform, they added 10% all attack and 20% fire damage to his uniform passive. For his ultimate, they added 50% all defense down that ignores immunity now, and they also gave him some super armor when you're using the ultimate, so if you don't have guard break immunity on your build, then that helps you from getting guard broken out of the ultimate skill. On his tier 2 passive, he gained 25% defense as well as 10% skill damage and bonus damage. Then on his 4th skill, he gained the silence and paralysis CC effects, which are useful for ABX if you're going to use them there, but also pretty useful in PvP. Besides that, he also got 15% increased health recovery on the skill, as well as a 10% damage increase to his self buff. And finally, the cooldown on his tier 1 passive got reduced by half, so it went from 20 seconds down to 10 seconds, and the uptime duration went from 2 seconds up to 6 seconds. I'm pretty sure that with this change you can use him in content like Alliance Conquest more consistently now, since you won't necessarily need a debuff lead for him to be effective. Here you can see what the most noticeable changed skills hit count are from one uniform to another. The 4th skill went from 35 hits to 41, and his 5th skill went from 24 hits up to 26 hits with the newest uniform. Keep in mind that even though the hit count is only 2 higher, the damage numbers are much higher in this one. The new ultimate hits just as hard, if not more, even though it lost about 20 hits from the previous uniform. It also got a really cool animation that shows you how charged up you are. In terms of a skill rotation, since you can cancel the 5th skill after he lands, the one that you're probably going to go with is a 5 delay cancel 4. And then obviously use your other skills as filler to get your ultimate up as soon as possible. In terms of his PvE performance, on a stage 10 of Null with a leadership and a support, I was able to complete the same stage a minute and 22 seconds faster with the new uniform. This was with a CTP of Destruction, so you can see that the new uniform for PvE at the very least is a very noticeable upgrade. Unfortunately, one downside of the uniform is that it doesn't excel as much as some of the other uniforms that characters are getting now that have really meta stats for PvP, like iframe ignore, counters, reflect, and so on. You likely won't be using Captain America in Timeline, but he does hold his own versus characters that have those meta stats or skills that I mentioned. So if you plan to use the uniform in content like Alliance Conquest, you'll definitely get some value from it there, especially compared to his previous uniform. He's a little bit more durable and has more survival now because of that healing, and his 5th skill hits really hard and has that iframe, which the previous one didn't, at least for the first part of the skill. The one that people are probably most interested in is Wolverine, since they have gone through 3 or 4 uniforms now trying to make him as good as he should be. With this newest uniform, they got rid of the damage reduction that he had and instead gave him 30% skill damage and 35% bonus damage, as well as 100% healing when he's under 30% health. So kind of similar to Deadpool's passive. On top of that, he also gained 15% chain hit damage, which is pretty good now because his skills have a lot more hits on them. The defense down on his ultimate now ignores immunity, and he also has his accumulation buff last for 4 more seconds, up to 10 seconds from the 6 seconds that it was before. His third skill got the most noticeable change and is the reason why he's essentially a PvP meta now, because he got that iframe ignore counter. He did end up losing the 4 seconds of invincible, and it got traded in for about 2 seconds of damage immunity, but the trade-off with all the other damage increases and debuff duration increases and so on is easily worth it. On his fourth skill, he lost 75% chance to penetrate all sources but invincible, and instead he got fire damage resistance reduction. Note that he did get 50% penetration to all sources on his third skill, which is way better than the 75 that does not include invincible. And then on his fifth skill, his self buff got increased by 15%, and he also gains another 40% chance to penetrate all sources on the skill on top of the one that he got on the third skill. So Wolverine was already known for going through that regen shield because there's kind of a secret mechanic with the bleed effect, and when the opponent doesn't have a debuff active, the damage can go through the shield. But now with him gaining 2 chances to penetrate all sources, including invincible, he can basically take down any character that has either invincible like an authority or regen. He also gained 1% additional health every second for his healing, which doesn't seem like much, but it adds up very quickly. Over 10 seconds, for example, he'll gain 10% of his health back that he wouldn't have with the previous uniform. The 20% ignore defense is basically moved over from his previous uniform passive, though he did gain an additional 10% on top of the 10% that he had before. The most noticeable skill changes are to his 2, 3, 4, and 5. The second skill basically has 4 times the number of hits now, going up from 5 hits up to almost 20 hits. The third skill is at an almost identical count, with the old skill hitting for 13 hits and the new one hitting for around 12 hits. I didn't really show it in the previous clip there, but as a quick note, the third skill does have an AoE kind of effect and persists for a while. Also, you can quick cancel the third skill. It doesn't have to trigger to get that 50% damage bonus to all skills for 8 seconds. Though if you want to get the 80% damage to your next 2 skills, then it does have to trigger the counter. Similar to the second skill, the fourth skill got a colossal hit count increase, going from 13 hits up to 41, which is over 3 times higher. And then lastly, on his fifth skill, he went from 47 hits on the previous uniform up to 68 hits on the newest uniform, which is roughly about 20 more hits. Oh, and I almost forgot, his ultimate skill hit count increased as well. It was previously 29 hits, and with the new uniform, it goes as high up as 54 hits from what I saw. However, although the hit count is higher, the animation time for the skill is longer as well, so I'm not sure if the overall damage per second is higher. The other very noticeable improvement to Wolverine with his newest uniform is that he has multiple skills that can be cancelled now, whereas before he couldn't cancel any of them. So with the new uniform, you can now delay cancel the second skill after you land, and you can insta-cancel the fourth skill and go into the fifth skill. That's generally a rotation that you'd probably want to use. But make sure to get the buffs from the third skill first, so you more than likely want to go with something like 3 cancel, 2 delay cancel, 4 cancel, 5. With the old uniform, I couldn't complete stage 10 of Null, and the fight ended with 11 health bars left. Note though that I'm not using damage proc on Wolverine, though with the latest uniform, I'm able to reach that same 11 health bar mark about a minute and 20 seconds faster. One thing that I did find a little bit troubling though, for his PvE potential at least, is that with some other characters, I've been able to clear stage 10 of Null in that 50 seconds to a minute and 20 seconds mark, which I'm only at around 11 bars with the new uniform. So although the new Phoenix uniform for Wolverine is much better in PvE, I'm not entirely convinced that it's going to be a top pickup if you're going to build him for PvE content. Essentially, it's like a reverse of Captain America, where Captain America is better suited for PvE rather than PvP, whereas Wolverine is much better in PvP, I would say, than PvE. I currently tested him with a reforged CTP of Transcendence that has the Pierce or the Interrupt effect on it, and although he did monstrously good in the timeline tests I took him in, where he was basically one-shotting characters with a single skill and easily surviving Doom's one-hit combos. The downside of that Transcendence is that he doesn't have that guard break immunity, and it really shows when you get hit by something like Doom's 5th skill. So if you want my opinion on build options, you can potentially use a Transcendence if you want. He does get kind of guard broken or head rocked because he doesn't have that guard break immunity, but his survival is good enough where you can survive through it and get the benefits that the Transcendence provides, which the others don't. However, the CTPs that I think would probably be the best for him would either be Regen, where you could just really amp up his passive healing, and you don't have to worry about the lack of crit damage or stats since he provides a lot of them with his own passives. That said, even though your crit damage would probably cap out with an authority, the 50% increased damage that you would get from the damage accumulation for regular CTP of authority, as well as the guard break immunity, would probably work really well. And if you can get something like the steal effect with a reforged authority, it would be even more helpful since they got rid of that mitigation from his uniform passive in the new one. But regardless of the build that you go with, you can see that he's a monster in PvP now, since he can cut through the revive metas regardless of whether they have that regen or invincible on them. Hyperion arguably got the most number of changes overall, and ended up landing somewhere between Captain America and Wolverine in terms of his PvE PvP performance split. He seems equally good at both modes, though he does show a bit more promise in PvP. As you can see from his new uniform passive, he drops the 15% crit for 20% increased guaranteed crit and the 25% increased fire damage. His new tier 2 passive now gives him 20% increased chance to penetrate all sources, including invincible, which is essentially like a native tier 2. Besides that, he also gains 45% increased defense and 10% increased bonus damage. Based on this passive alone, you wouldn't really want to give him a CTP of destruction, since that penetration from the CTP won't ever activate. You'll pretty much just get the 200% damage proc. Also, since he has that native super armor, if you want to kind of try a hybrid kind of build, you can potentially use something like a Judgment, or even something like a CTP of Transcendence, though you probably want guard break immunity if you want to use him as a dedicated PvP character. Speaking of PvP, his first skill, which is on a 6-second cooldown mind you, has an iframe ignore now, which is very similar to Sentry and very good for PvP. His third skill now has a 6-second shorter cooldown, which is really good for that consistent healing, but he also has 20% increased damage from the self buff added onto the skill. He also now gets the all defense down that ignores immunity added to his fourth skill that goes up to 50%, but as well as this, he also gets another self buff with 30% increased damage. The new fifth skill change makes him a lot stronger now, since the cooldown on the skill has been reduced by 10 seconds, and since the uptime for the damage accumulation is 8 seconds, with max cooldown, you can essentially get 100% damage accumulation uptime. And if that wasn't enough, he also gets that fire resistance down that ignores immunity, which makes him even more effective in PvP versus characters like Jean that have that high fire resistance, but also in World Boss Ultimate versus characters like Ebony Maw. His tier 1 passive also got an amazing upgrade, having 5 seconds knocked off from it, and his healing went up from 8% to 50% in one activation. I can't explain to you how good that is for PvP, especially since it's 100% activation after those 10 seconds are up when you get hit. And then on the PvE side, if you plan on using the character in World Boss Legend after you T3 him, Hyperion now has the best leadership in the game since it's applicable to all characters and provides a massive damage increase. One thing that I found kind of funny is that his third skill actually lost like around 21 hits, but because the skill cooldown on the previous third skill was so slow and the animation was so slow, the new skill might actually end up being better since you can activate it twice, giving you even more charge for your T3, and you can go into your other skills to do more damage. The new fourth skill is no longer a full iframe like before. It now has an iframe on the end of it, but it does have 8 more hits than the previous skill. The 5th skill was previously horrible to use and only had 10 hits, whereas the new 5th skill has way more hits, up to 31 or 3 times more. You can now also cancel the 4th skill almost instantly to go into your 5th skill. So a potential rotation that you might want to try out is 3, 4, cancel 5. You can also insta-cancel the 3 if you just want the damage buff. Before I T3'd Hyperion, I decided to take him into Timeline to see just how good the uniform upgrade alone was, and the results were actually quite surprising. Even though I'm using an obelisk with recovery and 5-second invincible on it, I don't even have guard break immunity on the obelisk, he was still able to take down top revive metas, and in the very end I only lost to Reflect against Silver Surfer, which I probably would have won if I got that HP and damage increase from having the T3. So based off the quick initial testing, I would say that a CTP of Transcendence could work for Hyperion, though if you're finding some of the top metas that have that super guard break, he might struggle a bit. Also, since he does have that damage accumulation for damage taken that goes up to 150% on his 5th skill, I wouldn't really recommend using an authority since it might clash with that and lower your damage. So that basically leaves regen for a survival based build, though if you get a steal effect on a reforged authority, it might not be the worst since you have a little bit of extra survival there, but at the possible cost of more damage from that damage accumulation conflict. In PvE with no damage proc, I was kind of close to finishing a stage 50 of Thanos, but I ran out of time with about 4 health bars remaining. With the new uniform, you can see just how much better it makes him since I can reach that same mark 2 minutes and about 40 seconds faster. And then I finished the fight with 2 minutes and 15 seconds remaining. Another reason why he's basically like a native tier 2, besides that tier 2 passive that allows him to penetrate all sources including invincible, is the fact that he gets a massive health upgrade with his tier 3. Also, that unlock animation was pretty awesome. But if you noted the stat increases, he basically gets around 12,000 energy attack increase and around 35,000 health increase. With the stat bump and the T3 skill, I'm able to complete the same fight 40 seconds faster than without it. I was curious to see if the T3 would make a noticeable difference after just getting it and fighting the same opponents again. Keep in mind that I have a really basic build on the character and it hasn't changed from the previous test. I essentially have no Urus on him, and I only have an obelisk with that 5-second invincible and with no guard break immunity. Also, I didn't really mention it before, but you could potentially use a CTP of Greed if you want to go more of a hybrid build, though from the testing that I did, his damage is already pretty good, so in my opinion, I think it would be better to go with a survival based build. Regardless, if you do want to try Greed, that option's on the table. You can see that just from the T3 stat bump, I'm able to survive the hits this time around and take out Silver Surfer. If you're wondering which of these uniforms to get first or which ones to pass on, I would say Hyperion is a solid bet, but he is a premium, so you have to take that into account when upgrading his uniform. Wolverine is a definite plus for PvP, but for the PvE side, again, I got kind of mixed results, so he definitely is better, but I'm not sure he's up there with some of the great update or upgrades that we've gotten for other characters. And then Captain America is probably up there for PvE, though his PvP side won't be as amazing as these 2 other characters, though it should be pretty decent nevertheless. I can't give you an absolute definite answer on these since this is only the first day of testing, and obviously Alliance Conquest hasn't started, so I can't tell you how they performed there either. Anyways, that's the end of this video. I actually broke down the highlights into 2 videos, so the artifact full explanation will be in the next video. So make sure to check that out if you want to know more about that and timeline survival. Anyways, let me know what you think about these character upgrades, and if you have any questions, leave that in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to you and answer it. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want more of this kind of content, and as always, thank you for watching, but the video is now over.